Okay.
With your permission,
Yes.
meeting. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to 45th edition of Distinguished Visitor Knowledge Sharing Lecture of CCI. Before I introduce our esteemed guest today, I request Chairperson Bhavan to welcome him by presenting him to your
Stop. इधर ही आ जाएंगे.
one photo. It's my esteemed privilege to introduce Professor B.S. Bajpai to this gathering. I have a big CB in my hand, but I'll request some excuse from Professor Bajpai that I'm not going to read that. Thank you, sir. So on behalf of CCI, I welcome Professor B.S. Bajpai, Vice Chancellor, National Law University, Delhi, for delivering 45th PK's lecture. Professor Bajpai has more than 30 years of experience as an author, researcher, teacher, and administrator. He has held various significant positions, notably as Vice Chancellor at the National University, Patiala, Registrar, National University, Delhi, and again Vice Chancellor, National University, Delhi. Professor Bajpai is the author of more than 22 books and has more than 60 papers to his credit on various topics of law. He's one of the widely written academicians in newspapers. So you read op-eds, you will find Professor Bajpai almost every week in Express or Hindu or some other news. So he has extensive publications on that count. Professor Bajpai has played pivotal role in evolution of concept of wrongful prosecution in India, and has been appointed as amicus curiae in Babu Chauhan alias W versus State Government of NCT of Delhi. Karan versus State of Delhi. Sunil Tyagi versus State of Delhi. There are a couple of celebrated cases on criminal law. Professor Bajpai has been honored with various awards for. I'll read a couple of awards. Notable among them are Sagar Ratna Award, GB Patt Award, Professor S. Srivastava Memorial Award, Best Social Scientist Award, and ISC Kumarappa Reckless Award. I again welcome Professor Bajpai, and the most interesting part of this address to you from my side is the topic. You may be aware, he will be speaking on quest for happiness in the journey of Viksit Bharat. Over to you, sir.
Thank you.
So you can use mic. There is a mic there. Or you want to use podium? You can use both. Whatever you want.
I think I have a habit of standing.
Please.
Teacher will never allow you. I can connect easily, I guess. It will be here, no? Sorry. Honorable Chairperson Ramit Kaurji and member Dr. Sanjay Pandey and all other members, senior officials of Competition Commission of India, and all other who are ready for this time today for this talk. At the outset, I am indeed very grateful to the Competition Commission of India, as this visit was long due. We have been meeting quite often at different forums. So I consider it to be a great opportunity for myself to share some of my ideas with respect to the topic, the quest of happiness in the area of Viksit Bharat. And as you can imagine that, and it is expected that being a person from the field of law, I should have been chosen something core law subject, which I didn't. And moreover, I did not, find it very appropriate to have something on competition law if I'm here, that is the field that you invariably deal with, and probably that may not interest you much. So it is in that this sense I have chosen the idea of speaking on this topic. But there are three things which I wish to say uh, as far as the connection between happiness, law, governance, and development is concerned. But I'd like to add a very small prelude to this talk before I formally say something. It all began a couple of years ago when I was contemplating, when I read the World Happiness Report in 2012. 2012, the first UN World Happiness Report was published. And this report has actually given me a sort of insight as to what are the factors which impact happiness and how happiness can be, further strengthened and can be contributed as far as the discipline of law or governance is concerned. So the quick question in my mind was whether there are some connection between law, happiness, and governance. At that point of development, I did not think of. It is in that sense I developed a article which was published in the Indian Express. And there I was trying to explore the connection between law and happiness. And I realized that this particular field is already being examined by some people in different countries because the happiness has emerged by a new yardstick of the measurement of quality of governance. So if you have to assess the quality of governance in a nation, you need to look at the idea of happiness. This was the thought. And when I tried to find further, I realized that scholars believe that happiness is not necessarily linked with the levels of per capita income or economic prosperity of the nations. Rather, they were concluding that the countries with higher GDP and higher per capita incomes are not necessarily the happiest nations. So then, when I studied these initial thought, I came to, or I was driven to this inquiry that what exactly the happiness means, because we as academicians may not simply take a subjective understanding of happiness. Happiness looks very subjective. What World Happiness Report has very objectively measured as to what constitutes happiness. I'll come to that. But three very interesting things I'll share with you, because those were in the background of my mind, because of which I am speaking. And they had very profoundly impacted me. And because of this fact, I have chosen to study this field. What are those three provocations to take me to this, examination or exploration? To my surprise, I came across the fact that Albert Einstein, this great scientist, apart from his scientific contribution, he has developed a theory of happiness. And there is a very interesting story that he has not developed a proper academic theory of happiness, but what he wrote once has become the theory of happiness. And a couple of years ago, that theory was sold for $1.3 million. The story goes like this. In 1922, Albert Einstein was staying in a hotel in the city of Tokyo. And there he received this communication which was brought up to him by a room boy. He came and he handed over that envelope to Albert Einstein. Einstein was surprised. What does it mean? And he could see that this is the communication relating to his winning of Nobel Prize. So Nobel Prize news came to him through that room boy. He immediately wanted to reward that boy so that he should also feel happy. But he realized that he doesn't have any change or ready money to be given to this person. So he immediately took out a piece of hotel stationery paper and a pen. And what he wrote at that point of time has become the theory of happiness. And what he has written, I read it for you. He wrote, a calm and modest life brings more happiness than the pursuit of success combined with constant restlessness. This is the line he quoted on a piece of paper which was sold for 1.3 million couple of years ago. And people are now researching in that. And he didn't have money, obviously, and he therefore. Second provocation, which I realized was very, very, important from the viewpoint of this idea of happiness, which I am researching today. That is the very famous, many of you have heard, Steve Jobs, that Harvard University speech. Many of us have listened, where he said there are only 3 stories, no big deal. And he is narrating that story. So I'm not going into his speech and all, but at one point in that speech, when he was mentioning that how he was fired from Apple, and after having been fired from Apple because the board wanted the things to be done in a particular way to which Steve didn't agree, and the board decided to fire a person who has founded Apple in the entire Apple history. When he came out, he was very successful at that time because the computers and all that Apple came into existence. So he was suddenly on the street. So he said at that point of time, he said, I felt very light. I said, I found myself free from all kinds of responsibility and everything, because manning Apple was a big tension all the time. He wrote a sentence there which conveys that sense of happiness. What he wrote? He wrote, the heaviness of being successful. The heaviness of being successful was replaced by the lightness of being a beginner again. Sometime in our life, we feel that heaviness of being successful, and it was replaced by the lightness of being beginner again, because he has to begin again now. And many of you know that he has then done that next company, and that Toy Story animation, Pixel he created, and he was a beginner again. Yes. And he became very successful, and again he joined Apple. But he said, so happiness comes in a very amazing way. Third, again, Steve Cutts. Steve Cutts is a very, very innovative person, a thinker, innovator. He said towards a new definition of wealth, because most of us connect wealth with happiness very generally in developing countries. He is saying perhaps it is time we reconsider our definition of wealth. And he's saying instead of measuring it in terms of money and possessions, we could start valuing it in terms of relationship, experiences, and personal growth. After all, the most memorable and rewarding moments rarely come with a price tag. So these 3 were the important things. Of course, 4 I can add, where Amrit Sen said. Amrit Sen said, the certain unfreedom he has talked about. When he said that poverty is a unfreedom. So means people have always linked poverty with economic resources. But how poverty could be restricting thing that he has said. Anyway, I started with connection with law and happiness, and then I'll come to Viksit Bharat and development. So the first premise in this discussion is that the law drastically impact happiness. We think uh, that the role of law is something which is a sanctioning instrumentality. It sanctions the behavior of people. We tend to limit the law in this fashion. However, law is capable of creating many positive obligations, which may lead to a collective conscience, care, cooperation, and collective role of the people to resolve their problems through distributive justice. So the happiness report 2021 is very interesting because around COVID time, it states that during COVID times, people developed a sense of trust and ability to deal with COVID. Induced effects which contributed to a positive evaluation by them about them. This report, at one place quotes a very interesting thing. It says to feel that your lost wallet would be returned if found by a police officer, by a neighbor, or a stranger, was considered to be a measure of happiness than income, unemployment, and major happiness. This is sense. There is a very good book by Tyler, Why People Obey the Law. Amazing book. And at one page, he is writing why people choose to obey the law, traffic rules are. Not because that they fear, not because that they believe in violation, because the fact they believe in the credibility of the law. Credibility of the institution is bigger than the deterrence that it is capable of creating. So this trust deficit in the enforcement of law is a major crisis. I have recently dealt with criminal laws reform. I'm not speaking on that because I have spoken enough on that. I was the convener of the committee. And so in one of the discussions, I said, it is not the severity of law which matters. It is the certainty of the law which is more important. And certainty of law comes from the credibility of the institutions which man the law. People tend to think that law would be justly enforced. Then the people tend to develop a respect for the legal regime and the legal institutions. And therefore, the legal regime is respected and people tend to get into law-abiding behavior. And therefore, here I have said to feel your lost wallet would be returned if found by a police officer is considered to be a measure of satisfaction. People tend to get satisfied in most amazing ways, which policymakers tend to forget at times. They think it's a very instrumental relationship. There is a law, there is a compliance. Between law and compliance, there are lots of things which happen. So in developed countries where laws are avoided, there are different external factors which are. Generally, we have created a legal system which is very internal. So there is a law, there is an agency, and we feel they should buy. There are other external factors which we tend to miss. And those are very crucial. Now, so the countries like, if you see Finland, Switzerland, Denmark, they are on the top slot of happiness. So happiness score in these countries is always very, very high, Scandinavian countries. And these are the countries with lowest crime rate. These are the countries where rule of law is best followed. So is there any connection between rule of law and happiness? Is there any connection between rule of law and development? Now, these connections have never been explored as far as we are concerned. The people in these countries rate their governance and legal regime to be highly effective. So how do you evaluate your legal regime? How people evaluate? I always see, because as I'm repeatedly saying, when we were doing with these laws, I said textual law is one thing, because most of law is seen into operation. When law operates, then only it becomes visible. So how people will behave vis-a-vis this law is very, very important. And there is no way to understand. People have very different way to react to these laws. You must have seen truck drivers were on the street. And we don't know how these are going to be unfolded and how they are going, truck driver and these kisan. So sometimes lawmaking becomes too distant from the people to whom it is actually to be applied. But the premise remains law ought to bring happiness to the lives of people. Bentham, we all know, maximum happiness to the maximum people. And the other side of the story is very crucial, as a great degree of unhappiness in the Indian society has a lot to do with the way law and its institutions operate. Do you think that law has become a greater source of unhappiness in some way or the other? And pain and anguish flow from the experiences of the people with law and legal system. It is erroneous to believe that every case that is decided by the courts or disposed by the court brings happiness among the people. Other day we were interacting with a group and we were trying to understand what does justice mean to the people. So administrative meaning of justice and the substantive meaning of justice are two very different things. If you ask the people, that case has been decided, but justice has not been done. So disposal of case does not mean the delivery of justice. We need to understand a new way of looking at the idea of justice is emerging, where people's satisfaction and people's evaluation of justice is becoming extremely crucial. Now, the World Justice Report, I will quote briefly, and then I'll come to Viksit Bharat issue. The World Justice Report says 40% people are living outside of the protection of the law on the globe. As many as 40% are living with a score of unmet legal needs. People are living with unmet legal needs. More than 5 billion people fall into this justice gap who are unable to resolve their disputes from land grabs to violent crime, and up to 5.1 billion people world over lack justice, including more than 1 billion without legal identities and labor protection, labor law protection. India has a big share in all these data. So administration of justice is a huge source of people's worry and concerns. So the estimated figure of 4.5 crore cases that we have pending, what are those cases and how those cases tend to contribute to the higher levels of unhappiness in the country? You know, in one case, typically, one case does not mean one person. One case means how many persons? No, not two. How many people are involved when a case happens? As a witness, as a victim, family members. So your whole family is disturbed. So one single case which is pending in the court is capable of infusing huge amount of happiness to hundreds of people. So if you multiply 4.5 by some 50 to 100, the figure will reach to some 75 crore. So law and legal system becomes a huge. People are in fray. Those who are attending courts daily as a witness, they are into a kind of tension. And therefore, it is very, very, so typically criminal justice system for these people is a source of unhappiness, as it is said, because they are in this state of anxiety, tension, and deprivation of various kinds. Now, on the rule of law index, the India ranks at 69. So it suggests that poor performance of the governance in 8 crucial sectors. And all those 8 crucial sectors basically has a chilling effect on the right to life, liberty, economic justice, fraternity, individual dignity. Justice in India hardly seems to espouse the goal of happiness in society. Because enjoyment of constitutional right would also require certain amount of resources for you to be able to enjoy those rights. You know, accessing justice is a costly affair. So in order to access the quality justice, what kind of resources you need to have? This is very important. That's why I'm saying the relative status of the people would decide the possibility of his or her accessing the system. So that's what I'm saying. On the one hand, there's the availability of justice and resources, but to access those avenues for getting justice, you need to have those resources at your hand. You know, so this is very, very crucial. Now, if I come to the idea of Viksit Bharat, which was formally launched in December, which says that India would be a developed country by 2047, means the 100th years of the independence. It sounds very, very exciting. The goal looks fairly achievable, the manner in which the economy is progressing and the way we are moving. But the whole issue is the focus and priorities in the choice of development planning is very crucial and complex. Why I say so? Because in Viksit Bharat also, economic development is overemphasized. If you see, the post-developmentalists now argue that this is a Eurocentric model of development, which is too economic and which reflects the interest of its practitioner. So what is the current structure of Viksit Bharat? Officially says structural transformation, organizing labor markets, increasing competitiveness, improving financial and social inclusion, governance, and seizing the opportunity in the green revolution. Aspiring to claim the title of being the world's largest economy will not fulfill the desire and ambitions that this country holds dear. Because we are gearing to become one of the top economic powers in the world. But whether this country aspires to achieve that alone at the cost of other indicators of development is something which is very, very important. So need for material development is very well accepted, but crisis of development have, critics of development have consistently raised concern about the conventional model of economic growth, challenging the contentious notion surrounding modernity and progress. Therefore, current idea needs to be reimagined to assess the aspect of development to resume importance. And therefore, in my submissions to the government other day in the in a meeting, I said the theme ought to be Happy India and Developed. Happy India and Developed India is very, very important, line. Happiness ought to be the central pursuit in this journey. Without achieving happiness, development has no meaning. And ironically, the nations have developed, but people are not happy. If you see the story of a fantastic book by David Valley, Forces of Order, where he has compared the developmental experiences of America and Japan. America has developed materialistically phenomenal way, but they have lost their direction of development in the social sectors. Resultantly, the relationships, social ties, and all those things were in jeopardy. Whereas Japan, despite achieving phenomenal material development, industrial development, they have been able to maintain the social fabric in most remarkable manner. That is still, that book is very old, but I'm sure those things continue to be true even today. So rich nations are not essentially happy nations. That we need to understand. Wealthy nations have only performed on GDP and per capita income, but have failed miserably in the context of social and psychological well-being indicators. 2020 report of World Happiness said every third person is affected by mental health. Globally, I am telling you, every third person, you cannot enjoy the happiness in a fullest manner because of these things. Therefore, mental health and mental wellness is very important. And World Happiness Report 2023 shows many developed countries have poor happiness markers. Some nations have attained both in a balanced way. India's case is very crucial because it ranked at number 126 out of 137 countries, despite being the fifth largest economy. So when you become the third largest economy in times to come, whether your happiness skill will remain same. So country will be developed, but people will be unhappy. I don't understand this contradiction. So happiness doesn't stem always from economic centric development model. Curious question would be whether India will have a better rank in happiness index in years to come. Development and Viksit Bharat agenda will remain a dream if we fail to imagine how to rise on the development index. In 2011, because it looks as if happiness we are thinking in a very subjective and hypothetical manner. There, I would say, in 2011, the UN Assembly passed a resolution urging all the members to capture the importance of the pursuit of happiness and development through their policy measures. UN resolution. They are saying you achieve development along with happiness. Soon after 2012, it passed another resolution which recognized the need for more inclusive, equitable, and balanced approach to economic growth and promotes happiness and well-being of all people. 20th March each year is commemorated and celebrated as International Day of Happiness this March. It underlines the importance of the pursuit of happiness in a public policy objective. Now, UN focus is emphasizing to make happiness as the goal of public policy. Means no legal regime or legal entity should be away from this framework of happiness. Subsequently, the World Happiness Report was launched and devised a robust method to measure and calculate the happiness. So happiness measurement has been done, which measures their way towards a public policy in many countries since its inception in 2012. So there is the happiness matrix includes 6 variables: GDP per capita, healthy life expectancy as one, generosity. Can you believe generosity could be a measure of happiness? Social support, freedom to make life choices, and perception of corruption to holistically assess what it means to be happy in contemporary times driven by. Now, looking beyond GDP is another premise. The need is to include social indicators for development becomes more pertinent as GDP estimates fails to consider the life's human and social aspects. Many countries as well as international conglomerates are moving beyond GDP as measurement of economic performance and social progress. So if we take the example of Bhutan, you must have heard the king, the fourth king, Wangchuk, who declared that the gross national happiness is more important than the gross domestic product. They are still doing gross national happiness. And I don't know how many of you are aware that there exist ministries of happiness in many countries. Ministry of happiness. So instead of calling social welfare, so like if you see Netherlands, they have an institute. In many countries, I think in Central Asia, they have the ministries. In some states, I am aware about Madhya Pradesh. Madhya Pradesh has set up a department of happiness within the state government. Yes. And a couple of more states are in line with. So somehow these state policies need to be geared to see what their people are thinking. Because ultimately you exist for the people. So that's why the claims are that we are doing very good in terms of welfare policy and development, but people are not happy. So that's something very, very. So in Bhutan, formally adopted the indicator, the happiness and indicator of development in 2008. And the Bhutan's case has been deliberated and discussed at length in the UN. And they have endorsed the Bhutan model very, very effectively, because this index that they have created, it assesses well-being and happiness under 9 domains across 33 indicators. It's scientific, basically. None of these indicators directly refer to economic development. Direct. Rather, they elucidate upon consequences of economic development, such as adequate housing. Housing is important. Life satisfaction, good mental and physical health. And this reflects happiness index seeks to measure happiness amongst the population of Bhutan by undertaking a comprehensive assessment of Bhutan's progress and growth as a nation. This therefore evinces how not only is happiness an important part of development, but development is also an important constituting factors of happiness. The two must always be viewed in conjunction with each other. That is the old idea. There are several other indicators which are very crucial as far as, but I would like to mention definitely about the common matrix across most of these indices is that of sustainability. In fact, World Happiness Report is released by the Sustainable Development Solution Network, and developmental discourses in the last few decades have been dominated by the notion of sustainability. Let us look at what sustainability means and how it is intrinsically linked to happiness. Sustainability refers to a pursuit of development which is stable and fulfills the need for development of not just the present time, but also secure it for future. So therefore, we all are aware that the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of 2015 by the UN, and these goals actually represent a development vision that of health and sanitation, quality education, affordable housing, energy, decent work, and it imagines development beyond the fiscal realm of GDP, and envisions development agenda for the present and future. So it is very, very important, therefore, that these metrics and indices are common between the SDG and World Happiness Report. There is a connection, therefore. And if you see the World Happiness Report 2020, which highlighted the direct link between sustainable development and public health. The report remarks that there are increasing marginal returns to sustainable development in terms of well-being. Therefore, the development agenda must not only be sustainable in order to ensure its continuity for the future generation, but it must also recognize its intrinsic link to well-being and happiness. In fact, the done, initiative of creating GNH index is to adopt a sustainable long-term view of development, which takes a holistic approach towards the notion of progress by giving equal importance to non-economic aspects of well-being. So thus as we march towards a Viksit Bharat, revisiting the pursuit of a developed India through a comprehensive, holistic, sustainable, and happiness-centric perspective, with the help of already existing indices, will also make India a happy India. Now, the issue of social connection was mentioned. I am very inclined to quote a very important line by Lara, who was the co-author of 2023 reports. Please read that report. That's by far the most brilliant world happiness. Reason? Because it was written against the backdrop of COVID. And COVID was a huge source of misery and terrible experiences for the entire humanity. But if you see what sustained the entire humanity, not economy, not development, it is the social connection. People, bonds, their trust, benevolence, generosity, all these things back into the life somehow. There were neighbors who were helping each other. So otherwise, we seem to have lost this very sense of benevolence and social connection in our pace to development and our journey to growth. And it was happening. So sometimes it was the nature's way of reminding us as to how important we as human to value the connection, social connection. What Laura is saying, the co-author of that report, we see those various forms of everyday kindness. This beautiful word, everyday kindness. You know, how to we see those various forms of everyday kindness, such as helping a stranger, donating to charity, volunteering, and ever pre-pandemic levels. So this report found that despite the pandemic, economic crisis, and personal losses, acts of kindness have increased globally. Acts of kindness globally. If the mankind history is to be written around this period, you will find the social benevolence and trust was at its peak around this time when the humanity was facing such a great crisis. So does it mean that in crisis we grow more tolerant, more considerate, more trusting? This is something. It's a testing time. The report highlighted the importance of social connection and relationship in contributing to happiness and well-being. We used to feel, empowered when you see somebody ensuring you that look, I'm there, and we were looking for those connections. I was discussing the other day with my group of people in the university, and I was mentioning, yeah, I'm very, pained to read some of the books on the social media and articles who are teaching us how to remain alone, how to enjoy loneliness. People are training you to be alone. And here this report is saying social connection is more powerful. Because I'm telling you, you take my words. Down the line, we are going to be the people who would like to be alone. अभी भी ये होगा. Because you feel less threatened. I don't know what happens. If you don't like to talk, instead you want to check your phone. This is the crisis. Because I don't know, some inhibition is happening. And this was not there always. People used to talk during train, their journey. Here the people would like to be strangers to each other. I don't know what is happening. And if you take this graph a little further down the line, 20 years, people will have no connection. They are coming, going, and just living all right. This life is going to be very, very unnatural. I don't know. Or natural. People are new natural, new normal. This is a new normal. And few things can always happen in growth. This is very, so people search sometime. Loneliness, there is a report, loneliness is becoming the biggest source of mental health issues. They don't have people to talk. They have only colleagues. Friendship era is over. There is no friend. Friend कहीं नहीं, colleagues ही होते हैं. जर्नलिया कहते ना, बातों से कौन समझा, सबको एक हाथ से जरूरी है. सोशल मीडिया पे सोशल मीडिया पे तो कौन से जा वैसे नहीं. So what kind of price you are going? This is the price of development. So this is very so statements such as we are all in this together. We are all in this together was a beautiful line which was floated when this crisis was happening during the pandemic, reflected a sentiment of shared experiences and responsibility, which drove people to take action even when they were not directly affected by adverse circumstances. Such factors actually facilitated in maintaining happiness and development in many parts of the world. The disruption caused by the global, pandemic. So this report of 23 is also saying, very important, that the pandemic appear to have increased the performance of kindness and benevolence of people towards strangers, helping, maintain, optimum level of happiness. They are saying, this is very, very interesting. And isme to, if you read this book, there are lots of stories about the people, how they have helped or how they were helped. So with respect to India now, the happiness induced development model, this I have written in one of the articles, happiness induced development model. I have floated this, I think last week, Hindu, this happiness induced development model. I received a acknowledgement from TMO and LG. They wanted to really discuss and see. I said, when your neighbor, small country like Bhutan can look at those indicators which are very, very crucial for the well-being of the people, why can't we in India? Because Indian society has been structured in a very different. European model of development could survive because of the fact that European society is a homogeneous society. They are not heterogeneous society. So in homogeneous society, anything that you do, it will travel equally for the benefit of all. So if I release a fund of say 50 crore rupees, it will reach equally to all. All the benefits will travel. There is no relativity. But in India, it cannot happen. People are placed very differently. So therefore, a country which is dominated by the social consciousness and a very, cultural centered. Oh, Devdutt Patnaik ko padhiye aap, sabse behtareen, he is actually advocating a model of social progress and growth. And Devdutt Patnaik is one person whom I have recently found to have been able to derive those sutra and mantras from our Vedas, scriptures, and all kinds of our, wisdom, traditional wisdom, to translate them into the modern context and management of people, affairs, institutions. And that's amazing. So a society which is governed by social relationship and cultural mandates. So like Indian culture is premised on these ethos of benevolence and trust. And therefore, we have this, I'm not getting into all those details, but this report highlighted how altruism facilitates well-being among not just the beneficiaries of good deeds, but also the doer of such deeds. It helps foster a culture of care and selfishness, which nurtures collective well-being over individual prosperity, with altruism and generosity already being present and celebrated in our Indian culture. It can be garnered and promoted to not just reintegrate the nation with cultural values, but also to harness it as a way of enhancing happiness and thereby promote development. Very interesting thing. India's welfarist policies since independence have been a reflection of this culture and benevolence. But as I have just mentioned, that the social service and public welfare form a major variable in calculating the happiness index. Nordic countries like Denmark, Finland, and Iceland that have been consistently ranked on the social support network in the world. So if you see, the Scandinavian countries are very strong in terms of having a very strong social support network, which is regulated and managed by the state. This network is facilitated by the state by enacting and implementing welfarist policy and public-centric laws, which in turn also nurtures traits of generosity and benevolence among fellow citizens, thereby improving overall well-being. According to 2023 report, Finland, Denmark, and these countries are the happiest countries. And these countries achieve development and ensured happiness despite the cost of social disruption caused by events like COVID. I'm also sure that many of you must have visited those studies in past OECD studies where they were promoting a concept. Development is also a disruptive force at times because the material aspects of development in a society move faster than the social aspects of development. And therefore, a cultural lag will create. If you see the development model pursued by the state of Haryana, and if you see the development model happening in Kerala, Kerala is very strong on social development indicators, literacy, health, governance. These and Haryana is very rich on economic development, but Haryana suffers a lot of social evils and ills. So in our country, this diversity you can very well imagine. But Kerala's model is very efficient. Their literacy is at the top. And if you see their entire walk of life, that progressive mindset, you will always find. That's very interesting. And the purpose is basically that we must remember that our cultural response and dharma of public service and benevolence while reintegrating them into our vision of development is very, very important. Therefore, when I say that development model has to go beyond GDP, I'm essentially trying, it's not that we are not focusing on social indicators, but I think there is a greater need of, making the people participated in the pursuit of development by emphasizing the social development indicators that would actually lead to the real conceptualization of Viksit Bharat. So here I'll stop and probably I'll have. Thank you so much for.
Ma'am,
Yes.
do you have any questions?
Open for questions.
Yeah.
No, it's a very interesting area, in fact. But I would be happy to know, what exactly is the linkage you'll establish between happiness and law? Where does the law come in? Do you think that the less the interface with the law enforcement, the happier you are? Or is it something different?
See, I always say that the manner in which the law functions at this moment, we have created an impression that law is simply there to create liabilities on the people. अब देखिए law is आप तो सब law के लोग हैं ना. Law is primarily seen as a liability creating instrumentality. But law can also be a right conferring instrumentally. Certain rights are also conferred by the law. But we see, so other day I was seeing that like in this law reform also, people are interested to know how much punishment you are actually delivering. We think law is there to punish the people. But it's not that. It's not always like that. Law is simply a communication of condemnation of your act, that this act is improper, morally not correct. But when I say law and happiness connection, is asking, basically, when law starts functioning in social engineering, in terms of structuring the society, developing the cohesiveness, like I was reading that in America, they are pursuing the idea of forgiveness. They are saying forgiveness is why you are condemning a lot of people, 40-60% people are in jail. Some people deserve to be given more, sort of compassionate, treatment rather than making them. क्योंकि वो जेल में बंद करके भी क्या कर रहा है? कभी आपने सोचा कि कहाँ से आइडिया आया कि कोई गलती करे तो उसको कन्फाइनमेंट में भेज दो? ये कहाँ से आया? वो किसी ने सोचा होगा? You need to be very creative when you want to punish people. So kahin na kahin we need to search how originally the law has been created to resolve the people's problem. As long as those problems are, addressed and resolved conveniently, people will be very happy. आप कभी एक अब दिक्कत तो क्या है ना कि हम लोग इतने ज्यादा कंडीशनड हैं इन चीजों से कि वो हम दूसरी चीज देख ही नहीं सकते। जैसे दूसरी चीज क्या नहीं देख सकते, मुझे अभी अनुभव हुआ इस बात का। यू यू आर ऑल, सब आप लॉ के सब विद्वान लोग हैं। दिक्कत ये है कि आप जो लोगों के लिए लॉ बना उनसे उसके परसेप्शन पूछिए आप। जैसे एक स्टडी टाटा इंस्टीट्यूट ने की थी, मीनिंग दैट दे गेन फ्रॉम दीज लॉस। तो डोमेस्टिक वायलेंस एक्ट है, तो ये लॉ से आप क्या समझते हैं? वो आपको ऐसी ऐसी बातें बताती जो लॉ में नहीं लिखी हैं, बट इट इज देयर अंडरस्टैंडिंग। सो बहुत बड़ी मात्रा में लोग इस तरह से लॉ को समझते हैं जो एक पॉपुलर, बिकॉज हमने तो स्टेट लॉ बना रखा है, पीपल्स लॉ तो अभी वो बन ही नहीं पाया। बहुत से इलाके हिंदुस्तान के हैं जहां भी कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन पहुंचा नहीं है ठीक से। सॉरी टू से, दे आर कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन फ्री जोन, आई एम टेलिंग। तो लोगों के माइंड में एक लॉ की परसेप्शन अगर पॉजिटिव होती जाती, वो समझने लगते कि इससे राइट्स भी मिलते, तो दैट कंट्रीब्यूट्स टू दैट लेवल ऑफ हैप्पीनेस। जी
सर, एक क्वेश्चन आई वांट टू आस्क।
जी।
सर, जैसे लॉ एंड हैप्पीनेस है,
हाँ
तो जैसे वी आर enforcing competition law,
हाँ
by making society and economy, rather economy more competitive,
हाँ
we are increasing the choice of consumers, and that will be linked directly to the happiness of people.
यस बिल्कुल। कंज्यूमर में तो देखिए सारा कुछ है। अगर कंज्यूमर वर्ल्ड का किया जाए, पीपल आर स्ट्रगलिंग। मैंने अभी कहा कि 45% पीपल आर लिविंग विद अनमेट लीगल नीड्स। अगर आप एक सर्वे करें, पढ़े लिखे लोगों की प्रॉब्लम, उनकी अलग दिक्कतें। हिंदुस्तान सिर्फ दिल्ली में नहीं रहता, हिंदुस्तान और बहुत जगह रहता है ज्यादातर। अगर आप एक सर्वे करें किसी रूरल एरियाज में, ऐसे लोगों की संख्या निकालें कि हाउ मेनी पीपल आर लिविंग विद अनरिजॉल्व्ड लीगल नीड्स, छोटे छोटे काम होंगे, ये कंज्यूमर से लेके 50% तक लोग मिल जाएंगे। फिर भी वो क्यों नहीं जाते? आप सोचें, जब 50% लोग कोर्ट नहीं जा रहे हैं, तब हमारी पेंडेंसी है 4.5 करोड़। अगर बाकी लोग और जाने लगेंगे, you won't be, our system does not have a capacity to deal with the kind of problem that the people are having. बड़ी, लेकिन आपने एक जरिया तो वही है लोगों को, उनको सेटिस्फाई करने का। लोग खुश होते हैं जब वो सेटिस्फाइड होते हैं। आई हैव ए ग्रीवियंस, आई वांट इट टू बी रिजॉल्व। आप कहते हैं, स्टेट कहता है आई हैव ए मैकेनिज्म इज सो cumbersome that it will create number of hiccups, then you will be pained further and further. Simplified system, simplified नहीं है। मैं बता रहा हूँ, एजुकेटेड लोग, मैं बहुत से डॉक्टर इंजीनियर को जानता हूँ, उनका छोटा सा कुछ हो जाता है, वो बड़े सक्सेसफुल, बड़े बड़े डॉक्टर, मैं नाम लेना नहीं चाह रहा हूँ, दिल्ली, वो घबरा जाते कि ये कैसे होगा, लॉ लॉ क्या होता है, इसको लॉयर क्या करता है, कोर्ट में कैसे जाना पड़ता है, यू डोंट नो। तो ये सिस्टम बहुत, ये कियोस्क जैसा होना चाहिए। आई हैव ए प्रॉब्लम, आई वेंट टू द कियोस्क एंड आई गेट ए सॉल्यूशन। दैट इज गुड, आई एम टेलिंग यू। जब तक आप इस लेवल पे नहीं लाएंगे, ये हो ही नहीं पाएगा। सर्विस बहुत अच्छा। सीसीआई आप देखिए, आपका एक डोमेन है। हाँ बिल्कुल सही बात है। कंज्यूमर, हाँ, कंज्यूमर ने लॉ में ये बहुत हुआ है कि उन्होंने सिस्टम को इतना इजी बनाया। आप देखिए, कंज्यूमर लॉ सबसे बड़ा लॉ है एक तरह से। ज्यादातर हम लोग कंज्यूमर्स हैं, कोई ना कोई चीज खरीदते हैं, अगर कोई उससे रिलेटेड, प्रोडक्ट से रिलेटेड एक ग्रीवांस है, तो आप कैसे रिजॉल्व करेंगे? अब वो कम से कम इतना है कि उसमें बहुत जल्दी उसमें सब तय हो जाता है, और हो जाता है, ऑनलाइन भी हो जाता है, सब कुछ हो जाता है। But it is not true of all kinds of laws.
Yes, sir.
Sorry to say, sir. I have my question here. I filed a case for 49 13. And that case was, old in 24. So, and system is like other courts.
फिर भी एक आध केस में हो सकता है, बट इट इज सैड, जो स्टैटिस्टिक्स है, जनरल एक्सपीरियंस है, कोई कॉम्प्लिकेटेड केस हो सकता है। एग्री विद यू। चलो फिर तो मेरी बात और एंडोर्स हो रही है जो मैं कह रहा हूँ।
Okay. So I was a tax expert for Bhutan, and I've got a personal experience of Bhutan.
Okay.
So there, the gross national happiness index that we were studying there, apart from the tax part. So there, the people of Bhutan, the officials themselves said that in Bhutan we have a very homogeneous population, and we don't encourage much of disruptions by way of foreign investments and all that. So that probably maintains our happiness. So in the Indian context, because of the heterogeneous population and because of a lot of differences, that kind of happiness might not ever come here and might not be the correct index for growth also and for a lot of other things.
देखिए, we can always minimize
Yes.
our problems. मैं ये नहीं कह सकता हूँ they should be fully eradicate.
Eradication.
But if we are able to minimize even the problem, see, यहाँ तो अभी मैंने statistics जो कही वो अलग है. यहाँ तो law is the source of happiness, unhappiness. Law should be a source of happiness. It is the source of unhappiness, basically. Because if you interact with the law, you will find at the receiving end. Even so, how a witness is called. मैं आपको बता रहा हूँ. We were doing a study on witnesses. Witnesses are the friends of the court. Witness को सम्मान मिलता है वो कांपने लगता है. उसने कोई गुनाह थोड़ी किया है. तो वहां खड़े हो जाओ कोर्ट. वो एजुकेटेड एक डॉक्टर गया, वो मेरे बगल में रहते थे, मैं किसी दूसरे शहर में था, भोपाल में. बोले साहब एक कोर्ट के सम्मान है, जाओ. कहते उन्होंने मुझे वहां खड़ा कर दिया. बहुत देर में खड़ा, चुपचाप रहो, जब टर्न आए तो बात कर. मैंने किया क्या? आई एम हियर टू गिव माई स्टेटमेंट फॉर समथिंग. आप देखिए, तो लोगों ने फिर धीरे धीरे कोऑपरेट करना खत्म कर दिया. ये सिर्फ स्टेट का पब्लिक जस्टिस नहीं रहा ना, ये तो स्टेट का कनेक्ट मामला है कि स्टेट की पुलिस, स्टेट का लॉ, वो सब कुछ है. तो थोड़ा सा दिस हैज टू बी एक्चुअली मेड लिटिल लिबरल,
ह्यूमन सेंट्रिक.
हाँ, कहीं ना कहीं.
अभी प्रोसीजर सेंट्रिक हो गया.
यह प्रोसीजर इतना कम्बरसम है कि हम लोगों को समझने में देर आती है. आम आदमी तो बनाया ऐसा गया इसको कोई समझ ना पाए जहां तक हो सके.
थैंक यू सर.
के लिए तो ये सारी बातें बहुत अच्छी लग रही है, लेकिन मुझे लगता है कि हिंदुस्तान ही एक ऐसा देश है जहाँ पे कि आम आदमी पुलिस वाले को देख के डरता है और जिसके लिए पुलिस बनी है वो पुलिस को देख के खुश हो जाता है. इस तरह का सेटअप होगा तो आप हैप्पीनेस को कैसे डिफाइन करोगे?
नहीं, यही कहते कि ऐसा रहता है. वो कहते हैं ना कि लाख हादसे हो शहर में, खैरियत है तमाम लिख देना. तो कितनी भी प्रॉब्लम हमारी है, हम कोशिश तो कर ही सकते कि अच्छा सोचे कि ऐसा एक दिन आए कि हम हैप्पीनेस की बात. देखिए, बातचीत करने में कोई दिक्कत नहीं होनी चाहिए. यूनिवर्सिटीज में हम लोग, पहला प्रिंसिपल हमारा रहता है कि जितना आप प्रोग्रेसिव सोच सकते हो वो हाइपोथेटिकल लगने दो. कहीं ना कहीं एक आइडिया ही होता है. नथिंग इज मोर पावरफुल देन द आइडिया हुज टाइम हैज कम.
Yes.
तो एक आइडिया जिसका वक्त आ गया है, उससे पावरफुल कुछ नहीं है. बहुत सी ऐसी बातें आएंगी जो आपको रोकेंगी, जो आप कह रहे हैं कि पुलिस, अगर आप पुलिस का चेहरा देखेंगे तो मैं आपको बता रहा हूँ, मेरा एक आर्टिकल है इसमें, जब तेलंगाना में इनकाउंटर किया था एक पुलिस ने, उसी समय मार्था जो डीन थी हार्वर्ड की, वो फॉरगिवनेस पे आर्टिकल लिख रही थी. तो इस देश में हम कम्युनिटी सेंटेंस दे रहे हैं, प्ली बार्गेनिंग दे रहे हैं और डेथ पेनल्टी भी दे रहे हैं. सब कुछ एक साथ कोएग्जिस्ट कर सकता है.
करेक्ट.
तो हर आदमी को सजा देने की, हार्डेड क्रिमिनल के लिए एक अलग सिस्टम बना है वहां. बट बहुत से लोग हैं जो 45% अंडर ट्रायल हैं, जो बहुत ऐसे तबके से आए. आप उनके लिए अल्टरनेटिव सोच सकते हैं. व्हाई दे शुड बी अननेसेसरली लैंडेड इन prison.
And I think all modern laws are on this direction, sir.
हाँ,
People like you also helping the
नहीं,
government.
तो कोशिश कर ही रहे हैं उनको
Because
बताने की.
Competition
जी,
law also
जी,
does
please.
that.
तो दिल्ली गवर्नमेंट ने
हाँ.
अपने स्कूल्स में
जी.
हैप्पीनेस क्लासेस स्टार्ट की.
हाँ,
अब मुझे क्लास में वहाँ होता क्या है दैट आई डोंट नो. तो सर क्या जैसे अभी न्यू एजुकेशन पॉलिसी डू यू थिंक दैट
नहीं, मुझे लग रहा है हैप्पीनेस करिकुलम, आपको मालूम, हैप्पीनेस स्टडीज एक डिसिप्लिन बन चुका. ये पढ़ाया जाएगा क्लास में, क्योंकि आप देखिए ह्यूमन बीइंग जो है, ये बात तय हो चुकी है कि ह्यूमन बीइंग जो है उसको आप सेटिस्फाई सिर्फ मेटेरियलिस्टिक उससे नहीं कर सकते. ये तो इंडिया में बड़ा अच्छा है कि आप मेटेरियलिस्टिक लेवल के पीक पे अभी नहीं पहुंचे. जब आप पहुंच जाएंगे वहां तो उसके बाद आपको अब लगेगा आप क्या है, व्हाट इज नेक्स्ट. तो इंडिया, जैसे आप देखें, अभी मैंने आपसे कहा ना, लोग अकेला रहना पसंद करने लगे हैं. ये एक एबनॉर्मलिटी की तरफ जा रहे हैं. लोग स्वयं इतने आत्ममुग्ध खुश हैं अपने आप से ही, बहुत खुश रहते हैं, वो दूसरों की जरूरत नहीं है. तो
Thank you, sir. Thank you. We can go on talking for
Yeah.
hours together. Nitin, please.
okay, thank you.
Chairperson Ma'am, Secretary Ma'am, Advisor, distinguished guests, and my dear colleagues. It is my honor to extend a formal vote of thanks on behalf of CCI to our distinguished guest, Professor J.S. Sir, your diverse and perspective depth and richness to our understanding of of the multi-phase journey towards the Viksit Bharat. Your presence has made this cost of collective journey towards the healthier and more prosperous. Thank you, sir, for your enlightening lecture and for enriching our understanding on cost of happiness in journey of Viksit Bharat. Now, I request the Honorable Chairperson, Madam Ji, to present a gift memento to our distinguished guests.
Okay.
Yeah, वही पे थोड़ा फोटो ऑफ भी हो जाएगा सर.
So you have organized some tea.
Yes.
Thank you.
Now, my request to Honorable Chairperson, Secretary, Madam, Advisor and Director to join the guests for the high tea.
Thank you.
ये कर दिया उन्होंने.